Welcome back, everyone, to Author Story. I'm your host, Alexander Lim, and our featured book for this episode is Peace, Love, Action Everyday Acts of Goodness from A to Z, which you can check out by clicking on the Amazon link in the video description below. The author, Tanya Zabinski, is a recipient of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Tommy de la Paula Award. She studied design, art, music, and philosophy at Buffalo State College, Parsons School of Design, and Kansai Gaidai University in Japan. And with her husband for the past 25 years has run an art-based business called Planet Love. So Tanya, welcome to Author Story. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Alex.
You're welcome. So first off, a little bit about yourself. What was it like growing up as Tanya?
Well, I'm very fortunate. I come from a family of 5 kids,
Mm-hmm.
and my parents were very alternative-minded people. My father was an artist, not for a living, but he was a photographer, and actually he gave me a camera when I was 5 years old and taught me how to develop pictures in the darkroom.
Oh, okay, cool.
So even at a young age, I think most adults would think 5 years old, that's too young. But my dad didn't think that. And so from an early age, I think that's one thing that made me look at composition a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking through the lens of a camera and framing things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from a young age, I was looking at composition and things like that.
Right.
And my mother was an avid reader.
Mm-hmm.
So she exposed me to a lot of, well, great literature, and she was also into yoga, and at a time when it was just emerging, and so I consider her a kind of a pioneer.
Right. So, among your childhood activities, I mean, I'm sure you've had a lot of favorite activities as a child. Uh, what are those that you still like enjoy doing as an adult?
Well, being connected to nature, my family used to go on hikes and go camping, and that's still a big part of my life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, cool. Okay, so
Also
go ahead.
doing organic gardening. My mom had a compost pile, and so today, so do I still.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, organic gardening and having a connection to the land.
Right, right. Connection to nature. Okay, all right. So you did mention, your dad teaching you how to develop uh, pictures at an age of 5, and I guess this kind of leads into your being an artist. Um, you did take the path of being an artist, and I do mean took the path rather than just going into it because you're a college major. Um, I'm sure a lot of folks get into something in life because of what they might deem to be practical reasons or because expected of them. And once they do so, they realize that something is missing. This didn't happen to you, did it? I mean, you're still an artist after all
Well,
these years.
it's interesting because since I was young, I always wanted to be an artist. But
Mm-hmm.
as I got older, my mind was telling myself that it's not practical, and I felt like I wanted, like a lot of people, I wanted to make some kind of contribution to the world and be
Mm-hmm.
helpful. And I felt critical, like how can I play with colors and composition when there are people in the world who can't, they don't have enough food to eat, and they don't have an
Mm-hmm.
education, and they don't have housing. So
Right,
I felt
right.
it would be more practical for me to become a social worker or a
Mm-hmm.
teacher or a nurse or a
Right.
politician. And so I wasn't going to allow myself to be an artist because it didn't seem practical.
Mm-hmm.
And what changed it is that I went with my dad to an art theater in Buffalo. We saw a documentary. It was called From Mao to Mozart, and it documented the famous violinist Isaac Stern going to
Mm-hmm.
China when the wall came down.
Right.
And people in China were very interested in Western music.
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't have a lot of exposure to it. So Isaac Stern gave concerts and master classes, and the people, since they hadn't had much exposure, um, when they played Western music, it was very kind of mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
And so Isaac Stern taught them how to he was an example of like putting the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And just as an example, there was a woman in a master class who played for him, and it was very mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
And Isaac Stern told her, put down your violin.
Mm-hmm.
He said, sing me that piece.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman sang it, and she sang it with feeling and beauty. And then he told her, now that's how I want you to play it on your violin.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just clear and palpable, the love that was shared between them and the excitement. And I felt like Isaac Stern did better than any political ambassador could have done. And he gave more to the world being a musician than he could have as a, say, social worker or, something you might think of as more practical.
Mm-hmm.
And after I saw that, I felt like, oh, maybe I can let myself be an artist. And so then that turned it around for me. And so it gave me, I gave myself permission then to let myself follow my love of art.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so so you have continued on the path of being an artist, and I know I've seen some of your artwork on cards and posters, and certainly it's an interesting style. So just asking, who would you say your major influences are, or what your major influences are?
Peter Schumann, he's an artist for a puppet company called Bread and Puppet.
Mm.
He combined images with single words, and I was really attracted to that. He also was involved in a lot of social justice topics, and I also like that combining art with social justice.
Mm.
He was a major influence for me.
Okay, okay, and I guess I mean it does show. I guess I mean Peace, Love, Action is essentially a book. Sure, I mean it's got interesting illustration, but it's also a book about peace and something that's totally different. And this is totally in the sphere of social transformation.
Yeah. I, well, in addition to art, I've always been attracted to that subject
Mm-hmm.
and interested in learning about people who were involved in that. And in the book, there are people who, well, some are directly involved with social justice, for instance, and civil rights, for instance, Martin Luther King, Ella
Right?
Baker, and other people are involved in environmentalism, Rachel Carson, Pete Seeger, Wangari Maathai, and other people, for instance, Julia Child. You might not expect her to be in a book about peace, love, and action, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel that for her, for people who follow a passion,
Mm-hmm.
it not only makes themselves happy, but it makes the people around them happy. So it adds a benefit to everyone. It enriches everyone. And so I consider that a form of peaceful activism as well.
Okay, nice, nice. So you've written 6 books. I think Peace, Love, and Action is what, your 7th book?
Well, my other books are not published. This is my
Ah,
very first published book.
okay, all right. Because I mean, well, first off, how did you get on the path of being an author? I mean, being an illustrator is one thing, and being an author is kind of like another, isn't it?
Hmm. Well, I always combine them. I love stories. I love pictures. I love pictures that tell stories. And uh, actually, children's picture books are a love of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even though I majored in art in college, I always was involved with writing. I
Mm-hmm.
consider art my forte, but Writing was just something I kept up with. I always kept journals. I always wrote stories and poetry.
Right.
And uh, so it's just something that grew along with me.
Oh, nice, nice. So, did you, just ask, did you ever want to become an author?
Oh, I always wanted to be a author illustrator
Oh, okay,
since I
okay.
was a kid. Yeah.
All right. And I've seen some of the, okay, the six books you mentioned. I mean, you mentioned that they're unpublished, but I have seen them. Well, kind of seen them online. And these seem to run on the same theme. You know, the simple things, happy things, exploration, feeling. Um, Now you did mention that this kind of springs from your, from your sense of social justice, but are I don't know how to quite put this. Are you really that way as a person?
Well, I I used to feel very inadequate, like I'm not
Mm,
doing enough. I
okay,
always felt
okay.
that, not always, but very often. Like sometimes I feel like I'm so involved in trying to make a living, and
Hmm.
well, our kids are grown now, but
Hmm.
when you have kids, there's a lot involved with. They did violin and hockey
Right.
and school and different things,
Right.
and so I felt like I'm so involved in my own world. Like, what am I doing beyond that?
Hmm.
And uh, well, I can tell you a little story that kind of illustrates that.
Sure. Go
Uh,
ahead.
so we live in West Falls, just south of Buffalo. We get a lot of
Hmm.
snow,
Okay.
and one winter in particular, we had so much snow. My oldest son had broken his leg actually sledding,
Mm,
and
okay.
my husband's back was bad at that time, so the shoveling was on my younger son and me.
Right.
So
Right.
every day seemed to be shoveling, 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 shoveling.
Hmm.
And I said out loud to him once, like, when am I ever going to do something worthwhile?
Hmm.
And the next day, there we were shoveling again. And then he said to me,
Hmm.
Mom, when are we going to do something worthwhile?
Hmm.
And when it came out of his mouth, I realized that, um, well, what that sounded like. And then I thought, like, just to be alive, to be able to have a body, to be able to shovel, not
Hmm.
everyone can,
Hmm.
um, and to be able to see the brightness and beauty of the snow, and to be with my son, and to have a driveway I can shovel, and
Hmm.
like that's worthwhile. And yeah, I'm not lifting people out of poverty, and I'm not, um, you know. Um, doing fighting for social justice, but
Right.
I
Right.
like just to if I'm complaining, that's a kind of mental poverty. And
Mm.
so I it just gave me a little sort of a shock saying, okay, Tanya, why don't you look at all the wonderful things around you? And, everyone in their life, they have to do things that they don't necessarily want to do.
Right.
But
Right.
if you can look at the good aspects of that,
Hmm.
then it helps you get through it,
Right.
or do something to make it fun. One of the mini biographies from the Peace Love Action book is about Andrew Biankowski, who
Hmm.
during World War II, his family was sent to Siberia,
Hmm.
and they had to live in a prison camp. It was very cold. There was very little food.
Hmm.
Um, they were there for 2 years, and he said that every day his mother and grandmother looked for things to appreciate:
Hmm.
the dewdrops in a spider's web, a
Hmm.
handful of wild strawberries,
Hmm.
and um, and so even in such difficult circumstances, if you can look for beauty, you can find it.
Hmm.
And the more you look, the more you find.
Hmm.
And Andrew Bankowski went so far as to say to not only be thankful for the beautiful things, but looking back on his time in Siberia, he actually says that he's thankful for that because it taught him a lot of life lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says if we can be thankful even for the difficult things, that it heals us and lifts us and just helps us look at life in a brighter kind of way.
Interesting, interesting. And this is an interesting point because a lot of people they think, I'll be alive, or my life will be better if I get, two cars or two houses and stuff like that. But that really isn't the case, is it? I mean, being alive is about noticing the little things.
Yeah, well, honestly, I also fell into that trap of thinking, oh, when I'm published, then I'll feel good about myself.
Right,
'Cause it took me a long time. I'm 56 years old, and since I was a kid, I wanted to be published. And
right.
so for a while, for a long time, I thought of myself as like not yet there.
Hmm.
And I felt like, yeah, when I'm published, then I can feel good about myself. Then I
Right,
can call myself an artist. And
right.
I can tell you, oh, well, one birthday I was feeling disappointed in myself. I was
Hmm.
actually, tears were coming out of my eyes just because I
Hmm.
was feeling like, yeah, all this time passed and I still haven't made it. But after that, I turned around and I said, okay, I have a beautiful life. I have a family who loves me. I have, a nice home. I'm able to eat nourishing food and make a living. And I don't need a publisher or editor to um, anoint me and say, now you're accepted.
Hmm.
I can accept myself and I can feel good about myself. And I felt like even if I never get published in my whole life, even if I never get published, I'm so happy that I have, um, like, art is an interest of mine. I can engage with it, and it can bring me joy. And even if it doesn't reach thousands of people, well, it adds something to the people around me and the people that I do reach,
Right.
um, and so I felt like I can die happy knowing that.
Mm.
After I had that shift, that's when I got published.
Mhm. Okay, all right. So
Yeah.
it's more like you got what you set out to do, not because you wanted something from it, but because something happened within you, and then it came about.
Yeah, like I gave myself the inner confirmation. I wasn't waiting for the outer confirmation.
Mm.
And then once I did give myself the inner confirmation, that's when the outer came.
Mhm. Right. Okay. Well, that's definitely different from the common conversation. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I have to ask about this peace, love, action. What uh what made you decide to write this book in particular? I mean, did this spring from a single moment you thought, I really got to write this book, or was it like a gradual progression over time, over months, even over years?
It was the gradual progression over years and
Mm.
almost really a culmination of my life because
Mhm.
all my life I've loved to read biographies and autobiographies of people who inspire me.
Mhm.
And one of the first um images I did for the book was the image of plant.
Mhm.
I had just read the sorry, let me get that.
Okay, no problem. No problem.
Okay, I had just read the autobiography of Wangari Maathai. It's called Unbowed,
Mhm.
and she started the Green Belt movement. She mobilized thousands of women to plant millions of trees
Mhm.
and regreen much of Kenya,
Mhm.
and it grew into other parts of Africa.
Mhm.
And so after that, I did the image for plant. And I was attracted to her spirit, can-do spirit, creativity. She actually melded two issues together. There was the environmental issue, but also in Kenya, women were very disempowered. They didn't make the money in the family, so didn't have the say as to where the money went. And so when they were given paying work, it really empowered them. So Wangari Maathai combined the social issue and the environmental issue in such a creative way. She also worked through a lot of hardship in her life, and it just, when I read her book, it just felt like it was filled with so much sincerity and earnestness. And well, I was just drawn to that and translated it into that picture. And originally, my book only had pictures, but it felt like it was missing something. So then, adding the biographies, well, it gave you time to dwell on the page a little bit, looking at the picture, and then it just gave more of a background of what the picture meant. So that's how that evolved.
All right, nice. And yeah, I mean, a picture. They say a picture can say a thousand is worth a thousand words, but even more words to explain the picture. That kind of rounds out the entire thing.
Yeah, and I feel that in life, like if you have a vision of what you're aiming for, then it helps you get there. Like even with the GPS, you know, you put in your destination and it tells you how you get there. But if you don't know where you're going, then how can you know how to where to go?
Right.
So I feel like, yeah, pictures give us a vision, can give a vision, and stories can too. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Nice. So Tanya, I'm sure you did a lot of research for the book. I'm sure you read up on a lot of people to come up with the material for the book. Was there one story or one person whose story you really, really, really wanted to put in the book, but which you couldn't for whatever reason?
Hmm. Well, when I, hmm, um, let's see. Uh,
Yeah, well, if you put them all in, that's a perfectly legitimate answer too.
well, actually, okay. So when I initially submitted my book to the publisher,
Hmm.
about half the people were different.
Hmm.
Um, and they wanted me to make the book A to Z. It originally was not A to Z.
Okay.
And so I had to change about half the people. Um,
Mm.
so that was a big challenge in terms of the time I had left
Right,
and
right.
the deadline that were set. And well, the other aspect was it was a little less diverse
Hmm.
than it is now. And a lot of the people, the way I was exposed to them was just um, kind of hit or miss. It wasn't anything calculated. And
Right.
so a lot of people I was exposed to happened to be white men.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they were doing wonderful things, but it was a disproportionate amount of white men.
Right,
And
right.
so mm, my editor wanted to make it more diverse, which I love that idea.
Hmm.
And it wasn't very hard to find people to fill those shoes.
Right.
It just required a tiny bit more of digging. It's like
Mm.
when you live in a, white male dominated society, then those are the stories that rise to the top. But
Right,
there are plenty of other stories out there.
right.
And so it was fun to find those.
All right, cool. Nice, nice. Okay. So Tanya, let's say me, myself, Alex, could, for whatever reason, I can do only one or two things amongst all the things listed in your book. what would be those one or two things you'd tell me to do?
Oh, I wouldn't tell you to do any, and
Okay.
I would leave it to you, Alex, to find what you gravitate towards. And
Mhm.
honestly, when I was working on having one of my exhibits, my first exhibit, I was being critical of myself because I was so busy getting ready that like I wasn't hanging my laundry.
Mhm.
I just put it in the dryer because I had to save time. And
Right, right.
was feeling like, Tanya, you're being a hypocrite. You're telling
Mhm.
people conserve, and here you are throwing your stuff in the dryer.
Right.
And so I feel like this is not meant at all to be, commandments or
Mhm.
like you have to do every single one of these if you want to be a peaceful activist. And even the activists in the book, like they chose something to concentrate on because
Mhm.
no one can do it all.
Right.
Um, but if you have something you're interested in, then yeah, whatever you gravitate towards personally,
Mhm.
that's what I would encourage you to go towards.
All right. All right. Cool. Nice. Okay, so Tanya, in the last minute or so of this interview, are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share to maybe inspire some of our listeners?
Sure. Well, I would say give yourself permission to follow your heart and your inner voice. Don't wait for permission or confirmation from the outside world.
Hmm. All right.
And
Nice.
I would encourage you to do that.
Okay. All right. And yeah, I mean that definitely works. It's scary, but yeah, sure. It definitely
It's
works. Yeah, it's
exciting.
exciting too. Okay, then. So, in closing, then, the book is Peace, Love, Action Everyday Acts of Goodness from A to Z. The author is our guest, Tanya Zabinski, and you can find her book on Amazon. So, Tanya, thank you very much for being an author story. It's a real pleasure speaking with you today.
Can I add one little tiny more thing?
Ah, sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the actions in the book is go local, and
Hmm.
there are a lot of benefits to it. Alice Waters is the mini bio that goes with it. And so, what I would suggest is actually if people can go to their local independent bookstore, I
Hmm.
encourage that.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
or if they order directly from Parallax Press, the publisher,
Hmm.
for every book that Parallax Press directly sells, they give another book to an incarcerated person.
Hmm.
Um, so there are a lot of ways to get the book. Um, Amazon is one of them, and
Right.
then yeah, I would encourage exploring other avenues as well.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Got that. All right. Definitely. So, listeners, take note. And check out Peace Love Action, and also be sure to subscribe to our channel to check out all the great authors and books we've already covered and whom we will cover in the future. So see you guys next time on Author Story, where we speak to another great author about their awesome book.